All right, good afternoon and welcome to another discussion of energy system development. Thanks everybody for showing up today. Today's background right behind me is in honor of my good friend. I mentor him. I'm fortunate enough to mentor him. Matt Lange, all conference at both Furman and George Washington in cross country and track and field. Phenomenal guy. Fellow alumni of Notre Dame Bishop Gibbons High School, and just an all-around great guy. He's asked some great questions of me, and he's the inspiration for today because of the question that he asked last week. So today we are going to get into assessing intensity, and we're going to get our slideshow going. Here we go. So today we're going to look at assessing intensity. Last week we looked at energy system development. We looked at our three basic pathways. And so today we're going to look at how we can use intensity to gauge what pathway is being emphasized in our training program. So first thing, starting out with a quick quote, things that get measured get done. And so when we look at intensity, if we can measure it, we know that we're going to be able to dial in better the pathway that we're trying to isolate. So how do we measure intensity? That's the overall theme of today's presentation. So in terms of our overview, looking at our operational definition, the operational definition of intensity, how hard the athlete's working. And then our guiding question is going to be, what is hard? So we've all done quote unquote hard workouts, but the end game is what did that workout accomplish? So the key is that one of the keys in terms of intensity is that it is moderated by intent. And that's a shout out to Coach McConnell over at New Jersey in the NHL. That is one of his most important themes. So getting the athlete to work with intent, this is the purpose of today's workout, and also using intent as coaches to guide what we are going to do or guide the design and implementation of the workout. So when we're designing the workout, we need to identify what is our intent? What is the intention of that workout? What is the purpose of the workout? If we don't know what the workout is, if we as a coach can't explain in one or two sentences what the purpose of this workout is to a coach or to an athlete, then we have no need to write that workout up. We have no business to write it up if we can't speak coach and if we can't speak athlete. So in terms of our direct measures, how do we measure intensity? In the weight room, we're going to measure it through bar speed. We can use a Tendo unit. Now, and Prince knows, Coach Prince is on the call today, and he knows that at the weight room that we work at, we do not have a Tendo unit, unfortunately. So we got to go on these right here. Developing the coach's eye. How fast is that bar moving? If we want a power movement, if we want a high anaerobic power movement, that bar has to be moving very, very fast. If we want a strength or a force movement, we need that bar moving very, very slow. So the coach's eye, and this ties into the force velocity curve, which is a little bit, it kind of transcends what we're talking about today. Other ways we can look at it, and Coach Lange will know that in the absence of heart rate monitors, we're going to use a stopwatch. We're going to have our athletes running at a pace that is a percent of goal pace, a percent of PR pace. The Oregon system, Bill Dellinger did a really good job of breaking down interval training using stopwatches, moderating intensity based on two things: date pace, what's their current fitness level, and goal pace, where do they want to be at the end of the training cycle. Other ways that we can look at it, especially when we look at ESD, are going to be heart rate and respiration. And these two can be measured right there. Heart rate, we can use a heart rate monitor. We're going to be talking about the polar system in here. I use the polar system. And then the other thing we're going to look at is respiration. Respiration is going to give us direct feedback. What is going on instantaneously there's a little bit of a lag between heart rate and respiration. We'll talk about that as we go through. All right, the Charlie Francis influence. So Charlie Francis, renowned sprint coach, and he came, when he was working with his sprinters, he basically came up with evaluating intensity based on the stoplight system. So there's 3 levels: red, yellow, green, and our red is high intensity, our yellow is moderate intensity, and our green is going to be low intensity. I like the stoplight system. When we talk about HRV, the Elite HRV app uses red, yellow, and green, and that way there, as a coach, it makes decision making easier. From a daily workout adjustment program, red, yellow, green is going to make it easy. From the perspective of writing a training program, when we have red, yellow, green, it's going to be easier and more efficient to write it, and it's also going to be easier and more efficient for our athletes and our clients to understand red, yellow, green versus some systems that have 5 or 6 zones. So with my training system, you're either red, you're either high intensity, or you're green, low intensity. When we look at the yellow is avoid. So this is going to be that classic high-low training. You're either red or you're green. We want to stay out of the yellow. And then our next slide talks about why to avoid the yellow. This is huge. So let's take a look, the externalities of the yellow zone. So the yellow zone, it's too hard to be easy, and it's too easy to be hard. For my endurance athletes, when we're working with lifetime endurance athletes, a lot of my current clients, a lot of my current athletes are masters athletes. So over 30, and it's athletics is it's a passion of them. They're not making money off it. They're not paying the bills off it. They have other things outside their lives. So one of the things that I have to be mindful of is taking care of their bodies, taking care of their hearts, so that they can be with their families, that they're there for a long. We talked about aerobic capacity last time. The heart's designed to last 100 years. So how do we keep them around for 100 years? They're very important to us. So that's why we need to avoid the yellow when programming for endurance athletes. We're either going to do workouts that are red, or we're going to do workouts that are green. We're going to avoid the middle. The middle is too easy to be hard and too hard to be easy. So the body isn't getting a stress stimulus. The body isn't getting a recovery stimulus. It's getting a moderate stimulus. And when we look at that, the majority of American athletes train in this yellow zone. The majority, you go, for anybody out there at bike racers, you go on a group ride, you're going to spend a lot of time in the yellow zone. And it's too easy to be hard, too hard to be easy. You're not getting a real training effect. The other thing that we look at here, and this is coming out of this book, The Haywire Heart, athletic AFib is real. It is a real thing. Too much time in the yellow zone will wreck the heart. It'll mess up the conducting patterns. It will mess up the beating patterns, and it will lead to afibrillation, and that could end you as a human. And that's not what you want to do. That's not why we train. So taking a look at our other 2 zones, looking at the green zone. The green zone is going to be that aerobic metabolism. This is where we have that the fuel is the fat. We're burning it with oxygen. We're getting over 100 ATP per molecule of fat. We're getting our carbon dioxide and our water. So the fat, the lipids, that's going to be our primary fuel here. So we're going to be in that beta. If you want a sedation state. Now, how do we moderate? How do we evaluate whether my athletes are in the green zone or not? First thing we're going to do, respiration, nasal breathing only. So if you restrict airflow, you are forcing the body to be as efficient as possible, both metabolically and biomechanically. So for anybody here, all my people that are in the audience work out, go and do 20 body weight squats, breathing through your mouth. And then, but this is after we're done here, we'll be done. So 10 body weight squats, 20 body weight squats as fast as possible, breathing through the mouth, and either measure the performance using an iPhone or be cognizant about, hey, how does the form feel? Then recover and do 10 or do the same number of body squats, the same number of body weight squats that you just did, 10, 20, but just breathe through your nose and look at how efficient, look at how biomechanically efficient those body weight squats are. So nasal breathing only is going to keep me in the green zone first and foremost. The second thing it's going to do is it's going to improve my biomechanics. So when we look at running, running is predominantly extension at the hip. The majority, 80% of my injuries in running happen below the knee. So if I can improve my biomechanics, I'm going to reduce my incidence of injury. If I'm training in the green zone 80% of my time, nasal breathing only, I'm really forcing my body to get into that triple extension, that extension of the driving with the extension of the hip, getting into good ankle dorsiflexion, coming off of that ankle, and having excellent form. So nasal breathing only, great way to moderate intensity. The second way to do it, if we're using heart rate monitors, we're going to go 180 minus age. This is going to give us the bottom line green zone. Excuse me. That's going to give me my top end green zone. Then if I have an athlete that's been training uninterrupted for more than 1 year, I'm going to add 5 beats per minute. If I have somebody that's returning from illness or injury where they've missed 4 to 6 weeks, I'm going to subtract 5 beats per minute until they have returned to functionality. Then I'm going to bump them up to just 180 minus age, and eventually I'll bump them up to 180 minus age plus 5 beats a minute. So we take a look, giving you an example of where I am right now. So I'm 52. I round down to 50 to make the math easy. 180 minus age. So 180 minus 50 gives me 130. I've been at it for more than a year uninterrupted. So now I add in 5 beats a minute. I'm at 135. So the upper bound of my green zone is going to be 135. The lower bound of my green zone is going to be 100. As Coach Bennett at Union College says, stay tuned, and we'll get to the lower bound later on this summer. The whys and wherefores of that 100 versus, say, a 95. So green zone, high end, nasal breathing only. If we're going respiration as our guide. From a heart rate standpoint, 180 minus age, add 5 beats a minute if they're an experienced endurance athlete, subtract 5 returning from illness or injury, new to the game, and then just 180 minus age if they're in that middle zone. Taking a look here, this is an example of a green zone session that I did last spring. So this is a 3-hour ride on my bike, and you can see right here for 3 hours, I was right in that green zone. There's this right here, there's a little hill coming up to my house, and that's where I got my spike up a little bit north of 135. But in here, I'm going to be deep into that beta oxidation, and what I'm doing is I'm biomechanically efficient. I'm teaching my body to burn fat as a fuel, which is critical. It builds the bottom, it builds the base of that aerobic development period. Architecture 101, the wider the base, the bigger the base, the higher the peak. So the purpose of this ride right here was to build aerobic capacity. Now, taking a look at our red zone. The red zone, 90% max heart rate. So Coach McConnell at UMass Lowell, when he was at UMass Lowell, we talked about how he sets intensity, and I like how he does it. So I said, hey, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. If it works for him, it's going to work for me. So I start out, all my athletes, all my clients, we start out with 220 minus age. So for me, 220 minus age puts my max heart rate at 180. Whew, math skills, math 101, not good for me today. So my max heart rate, 180. And now what I'm going to do here is adjust it via individual response. Actually, I take that back. Max heart rate's 170. And then I'm going to adjust this via individual response. That's what, so Coach McConnell at UMass Lowell starts out, all his athletes were 20 years old when he was working at Lowell. And so he would start out, their max heart rate is 200. And then if he sees on the daily data for heart rate, if they're going as hard as they can and heart rate's not coming up to 200, he would adjust their heart rate down. Or if they're constantly spiking, say 210, 205, he would raise their heart rate there. When we look at red zone and individual response, when I was a grad student at the Cuse, we tested a guy who was on the national team in cross country, and he was in college, and his max heart rate was 175. So this 220 minus age isn't going to apply to him. If I was working with him now, I would set 175 as his max heart rate and then adjust the percentages off of that. So the red zone is going to involve the lactic pathway that we talked about last week. When we look at the lactic pathway, right at that 90% level, this is that anaerobic threshold. So when we were looking at 135 minus age, in the green zone, our body is burning fat aerobically. When we get above 90%, our body is burning carbohydrates anaerobically, and that's what carbs are designed to do. That yellow zone is where our body is burning carbs aerobically, not really what it's designed for. So above 90%, we're in this anaerobic threshold. So when we look at what's going on here, economics 101, supply and demand. Below our anaerobic threshold, lactate production is less than the body's ability to remove lactate. It's not going to build up. We're good. Above the anaerobic threshold, lactate production is greater than the body's ability to remove lactate. So we're going to start to accumulate lactate, which means eventually we're gonna fatigue. So now we look at what I call push and pull. What is the role of the lactic pathway? How are we using the lactic pathway to drive performance? Are we using it as support, or are we using it as our main driver? I'm going to illustrate those in the next couple of slides. So when we look at, are we pushing or pulling using the lactic pathway, one of the considerations is how fast did this lactic pathway get activated? So now we go back to math, and we're going to look at the slope of that heart rate graph. In other words, did my heart rate jump up like this, or did it gradually go? I'm having trouble with did it gradually go like this? So how fast? What's the slope of that line spiking up there? Well, this is a workout that I did a couple of weeks ago. It was 8 times 400. So 8 times for me, about 75 seconds. This is going to be my warm up here. And then these right here, when we take a look at our slopes, so things to be real cognizant of, I'm going to put up another graph, and it's going to look like the slope is the same, but we got to look at the time of the workout. So the total time of this workout was my main set was just around 25 minutes, under half an hour. So right here, my warm up, what I need to do as part of my warm up is, I call it breaking the glass ceiling, where we're going to do several efforts where we're going to get that heart rate up into the red zone. So my red right here, 80%, 88% of my max, or 150. There's my max right there, 190. This is my red zone here. I use 150. It just makes the math a little bit easier for me. One of my guiding principles is KISS, keep it super simple. So when we're looking at keeping it super simple, red, yellow, green, and then rounding a little bit in demarcations of 5. So 100, 135, 150, and then 170. So we do a couple striders in here. I did a little 4 stride package. Got the heart rate up. So now I've sent my body into that anaerobic metabolism. I've broken through my anaerobic threshold. So now my body knows what to do. I got to teach the body what to do. Then I do my first interval, ramp it up. I'm into the red, and then let it come down. We're going to talk about the whys and wherefores of the recovery a little bit later on this summer. But what we're looking at here when I say the lactic system pushes is that my lactic system is what's driving the heart rate up. So the lactic system is what, because the rate of change, heart rate's rate of change is so fast in here, it's so steep, that the lactic system becomes that main driver pushing that heart rate up. And then we let the lactate clear, we hit another interval, back up we go. So in a short, high intensity, short bouts, anything 90 seconds on down, the lactic system is what's going to push the heart rate up. Next thing we take a look at here is, this is when the lactate system is going to pull. So this is a 30 plus, right around 30 minutes. This is going to be, I did this on my bike. I call this a tempo ride. And the first thing we look at here is the slope of this line. And then, so it took right around 5 to 6 minutes for my body to go from an aerobic state here all the way up to an anaerobic state here. So because my heart rate took 6, 7 minutes to rise up there, the aerobic pathway is going to dominate the equation for this entire workout. So my aerobic system is going to be my main driver. I'm going to be burning fats aerobically. I'm going to be burning carbs aerobically. And then what's going to be happening is that my body is going to, when we talk about the pull of the lactic system, here, the lactic system is just going to be responsible to pull this heart rate up above 150. So the last 2 or 3 beats in here, the last 2 or 3, 4, 5 beats while my heart rate is in the red is going to be lactic driven. The rest of it from here on down is going to be aerobic driven. We compare that with what's going on over here, where from rest all the way up to 170 or above 170, that's all the lactic system just shoving the heart rate up there. So that's going to be the push and pull of the lactic system. And that is our last slide for today. Next week is the Friday before Memorial Day in the CrossFit community, the Murph workout to honor Lieutenant Michael Murphy, for Long Island native, is the mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, and a 1 mile run. So next week, we're going to talk about the metabolic pathways and the whys and wherefores of Murph. We are going to dissect Murph next week. And that is it. Questions, comments, we good? All right.
Doc, I got a question.
All right.
So what would you say then is the difference? You talked about this idea of like the push versus the pull.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm sure going to see that like the pulling piece you're talking about, just like those last few beats are being pulled by the anaerobic system, whereas the push, it seems like you're saying that the anaerobic system is the main driver. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah. Give me a second here as I try to clear out my. I'm still new to the. There we go. Yeah. So looking at push and pull. So here in my push, the lactic system is the main driver. It's what dominates the equation for getting the heart rate up. The lactic system is going to be what causes the activation of the lactic system is what causes the heart rate to spike.
So would you potentially categorize a training session with that intent as maybe like a lactate power type session or something along that line versus you're pulling as like a lactate capacity type exercise or session?
So actually, that's a really good question, Coach. And then when we look at power and capacity, the difference between a power workout and a capacity workout from an ESD perspective is going to be how long, where you let that heart rate drop to. So this right here, this workout was an anaerobic capacity workout for me. So what I'm doing is building my ability to do anaerobic bursts. And then I'm going to, as a variable that's not shown here, but I'm going to look at pace as another variable. So when heart rate recovers to 135, that's going to be a capacity workout. So my ability to do repeated efforts. If I were to let my heart rate drop to 99, like the stuff that we used to do, that's going to be a power workout. So power, the body's ability to do work quickly. I'm going to need to let the body, the metabolic system recover fully before I go again. So depending on what I want to do with the workout, do I want to have it as a capacity or a power workout? That's going to be dictated by how much recovery I get. So do I let heart rate drop to 99 or do I let it drop to top of the green? Whatever the top of the green is for that athlete. So for me, it's 135. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
All right. Anybody else?
Hey, just curious on the book you mentioned, The Haywire Heart. So
yes.
Did it talk more similar to the Charlie Francis program about not training in the middle? Is that what was in the heart?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's that avoid the middle.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that you would say the middle would be 65%?
Yeah, the middle is that right around 50%. It's going to be below 90, like right around say 75%. And Coach, I know that Coach Travis, I know you come from a running background, so just think about all the runs that we did in college. All those coaches, our head coach would say, all right, go out and run 5. And we'd go out and we'd run 5, and we'd do a 5-miler, and we wouldn't jog, but it wouldn't be a tempo run. That'd be a yellow zone run. And when you go back and you look at it, at least for me in my system, we did a lot of runs in the yellow. And you can compare that to how the Kenyans train. And I'm fortunate enough to be working with some Kenyans right now, and they teach me as much as I teach them. And one of the things I learned from one of my all-conference guys is if you see him go for a run, just a distance run, he'll run 10-minute miles on on Sundays. He'll go out and he'll do a 2-hour run, and he'll do 12 miles in 2 hours. But then he'll turn around on Tuesday and we'll do some sort of an 800 breakdown workout, and he'll be closing out that last 800 in 159. So that's when we look at that high-low, there it is right there. Wow. You don't want to go too easy. I mean, you don't want to go too hard on your easy days, but on your hard days, you can let the horse out of the barn. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's almost like, anybody who ran track in high school 20 some years ago, and they're in the middle age group, right? They want to get back into running. They're so used to building that mileage base, right?
Right.
Old school, build your mileage, and that mileage was all middle.
It was absolutely, Coach. When we came up, it was all middle, and the hardest thing is to get the athlete to appreciate this right here. This yellow zone is going to be that chronic cardio zone where our body is our body's building. Let's get right back to this one. Here in this yellow, our body's developing doing aerobic work, but we're burning carbohydrates. We're not burning fat as a fuel source. So if we teach our body here to burn fat as a fuel, we can go on forever. We can run like Eliud Kipchoge when he did the sub 2-hour marathon. He was burning fat as a fuel source. He spent months just developing his ability to burn fat as fuel. Awesome. And then he topped it off with some high speed work, but he was avoiding that middle in there. Yeah.
Interesting. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Doc.
Yes, Coach.
So, would you say to teach your body how to burn fat as a fuel, that's just by training in the green zone?
Green zone, absolutely. So, nasal breathing only. And I know that you come from an anaerobic sport background. So, having your athletes go out after, if you give them a hard morning workout, have them go out in the afternoon and just do a half an hour walk where they're just breathing through their nose. And that's going to develop this aerobic capacity. And here's the thing. In all sports, you need this aerobic capacity. Even in football. A couple of years ago, Towson played Wake at Wake. It was the first game of the season. Both teams were a pass-heavy offense. And the game time, the game started at noon. It ended at 4. So that's going to be, and the heart rate is going to be up that entire time. The athletes on the sideline, whether they're in the play or not, their heart rate is going to be somewhere in this green zone here. So with that being said, even your football athletes need aerobic capacity. So sending them out after practice for a half an hour walk. You want to make it a little bit tougher, have them wear a backpack of books, and you'll get some good trap development. You'll get some muscular endurance of the traps and the delts in the shoulder girdle for as a side, as a little added benefit. But yeah, nasal breathing only walks for my football players, key.
One of my favorite conditioning for my hockey players is turf tempo, where they set the distance and they run, obviously above 90%, they sprint, and then they walk. And they do that for 10 to 15 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Getting it. And then again, the principle of specificity with that, stopping and starting is hard. Hockey is going to be an intermittent sport. So they're running 100 down, hit it, 100 back. Just like you said, that turf tempo, or Coach Ward, one of our favorites for lacrosse, is going to be the rack. And yeah,
that's cool.
Good stuff. Anybody else? We good?
Thanks, Doc.
All right. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thanks, Doc.
Thank you, Doc.
My pleasure. It was great seeing everybody, and we'll be back at it next week.
All right.
And I guess what I say here is I am out.
All right. See you next week.